Today we're going to be talking about finding the area of triangles. And you've already attended the first piece of the lesson where I showed you how we arrived at the formula for the area of triangles. And that formula is that area equals 1/2 base times height. And we know that it's half base times height because a triangle is half of a rectangle. And so therefore we are really, when you multiply that base times height, you're finding the area of a full rectangle. And then we multiply it by half so that we only get the portion of that rectangle that we need. Let's go ahead and work one of these out. So this first triangle, you'll notice, has that dotted line that we talked about that shows the height. The height will always be perpendicular to the base. And you have to use the height when you are calculating the area of the triangle. You can't use those slanted lines. Like here you can see that we have 12 inches labeled for the slant. You never use the slant. You always use the base and the height of the triangle. The height is perpendicular to the base. So it makes this right angle. So sometimes we see that dotted line that out to the side of the triangle that shows us exactly how tall the triangle is. Just like when you go to the doctor, they tell you stand up straight to measure your height. Same thing for a triangle. You need it to be standing up straight so we don't use a slanted line. Now, our first line in showing our work, which you are turning in today, is where we write the formula. So area equals 1/2 base times height. And all of those are written right next to each other with no symbol in between because that represents that we're multiplying. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute in the values that it gives me in this model. So we're still finding the area, and that equals 1/2. We already have that value for. I'm going to use parentheses and substitute in the base. The base is right here. It's 8. And then I'm going to use another set of parentheses to substitute in the height of 10. It's not the 12, it's the 10 because it is perpendicular to the base. Now, when you show your work, I will be expecting 3 lines of work. The first line is your formula. The second line is your substitution. The third line will always be whatever your solution is. Sometimes you're going to have math like this one that you can do in your head. Sometimes you're going to need to show doodle work off to the side. That's fine. But I want to see these 3 lines every time. If you can do this one in your head like I can, I'm perfectly fine with you writing the solution. However, there are going to be times where you're going to have crazy decimals and crazy fractions. I do expect to see the doodle work then. So the associative property of multiplication tells me that I can group these in any way that I choose. So I can first do 8 times 10 if I want to, and then find half of that. I can find half of 8 and then multiply that by 10. I can find half of 10 and then multiply that by 8. It doesn't really matter. Whichever way I decide I want to solve it works. I can change the grouping and change how I'm multiplying. So I'm going to go ahead and do 8 times 10, which gives me 80, and then half of 80 is 40. So I know that the area of this is 40 square inches. It's square inches because we are taking and looking at 2 dimensions. We're looking at the base and the height. So therefore our units are squared. Area is always squared. Let's look at another one here. First line is my formula, 1/2 base times height. Then I'm going to substitute in my base is right here, 36. My height is right here at 12. So now from here I have 3 options. I could find half of 36 and multiply that by 12. I could find half of 12, multiply that by 36. I could multiply 36 by 12 and then find half of that. Well, in my mind, it's easier for me to find half of 12, which is 6, and then multiply 36 times 6 over here in my doodle work. So 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 3 is 18, plus 3 is 21. So the area of this triangle is 216 square meters. So what we ended up doing here was we multiplied 36 meters by 12 meters and then multiplied that by 1/2. So here I have meters times meters. So that meters squared is because I multiplied meter times meter. Remember, exponents tell us that we're multiplying something by itself. So if you have m to the second power, that's the same thing as saying m times m. That's why those units squared on area are always there, because we multiplied meters by meters, and we have to represent that. Last one that we're going to do together. This model can be tricky if you are not thinking about what space is actually the triangle. So when I look here, I know I'm not using the 20.9 because that's part of the slant. Sometimes kids want to add this 4 centimeters to the 16 centimeters, but this space right here is not part of the triangle. It's just an empty space. It's just an empty part of the lines where they've shown you the base and the height being perpendicular to each other. So make sure you're not adding that 4 centimeters in. It's really just there to trick you. So now I'm going to substitute in my base is 16 and my height is 6. To me, it's easier to find half of 16 on this one, which is 8, and then 8 times 6 is 48. So we end up with 48 square centimeters.